Their 7-year run will go behind the...
She finds the strength to fight a long and difficult bureaucratic battle with the U.S. Immigration and Naturalization Service.
We filled out the paperwork they told us to fill out. We went to the INS and handed it to them, and the INS right then and there handed the paperwork back to us and said, we will not accept these papers.
That was about 5 years ago when Marianne and her husband, Louis Shaban, a South African citizen, were first married.
Mr. Shaban came to the United States in 1993 and overstayed a visa. He did not commit a crime. He's been paying his taxes since then and has been a good citizen.
But unfortunately, during the immigration ordeal, Marianne was diagnosed with cancer, terminal lung cancer.
We really don't know why. Why are they doing this to us? Why, when my wife has to survive cancer, we have to do this? We want to fight cancer.
The INS did grant Louis a temporary visa in January of this year. It expires in 9 months.
What happens if I'm still alive in a year and he's back in South Africa? How am I supposed to live?
The INS won't comment on the couple's case, nor have officials decided whether the Shaban situation should be reviewed as an exception to immigration laws.
At the very minimum, the right thing to do is to let him stay here with his wife in her dying days. Now, if the INS wants to take the further step of allowing him to stay here permanently, I'd be all for that.
Behind every single one of those applications, there's real people, and we have real stories. And that's what my plea to the INS is.
Immigration experts suggest the INS is taking action against Louis Shaban because he overstayed his visa. But according to those experts and Senator Schumer, the INS has the ability to make exceptions for humanitarian reasons. The Shaban's lawyer is hoping to reopen the case as soon as next week. Roland?
All right, Joanne, thanks. It was
clear if they can. Andrea Day has their story.
We got his letter of deportation on the day of my first chemo treatment. And I looked at my husband and I said, they put the nail in my coffin.
It's the last thing Marianne Shaban thought she'd have to face. She's dying of lung cancer, but now the INS wants to deport her husband, the love of her life and father to her 2 kids.
If he leaves the country, I am literally out on the street. I have nowhere to go.
Louis Shaban entered the country from South Africa lawfully back in '93, but the INS says he overstayed his visa. And when the two married, the INS told them it was too late to change his status. The couple has spent years trying to cut through a maze of red tape, but now their time is running out.
If I go, nothing, Marianne will be destitute. She'll be on the street. She has no one.
Enter the Wilds attorneys who saved John Lennon from deportation in the 70s. Wilds got the INS to agree to a year's stay through next January, but that's it so far.
We have a government that is looking for terrorists internationally, and yet they're going after the Shaban family in Long Island.
If he leaves the country after January, he'll be barred from re-entering for at least 10 years. His only hope now is that someone inside the INS will make a change.
I always thought, your country is there for you. I truly, truly believe that, and I couldn't believe it when they said, you've exhausted all appeals, he's got to leave, case closed.
The INS would only tell us they're happy to set up an appointment to speak with the family. Andrea Day, Fox 5 News.
An historic discovery, and reporter Michael O'Looney has their story.
Marianne Lamont Shaban of Long Beach says she's overwhelmed trying to fight 2 battles at the same time. One is a fight against stage 4 lung cancer. The other is against the Immigration and Naturalization Service, which wants to deport her husband, Louis.
We got his letter of deportation on the day of my first chemo treatment. And I looked at my husband and I said, they put the nail in my coffin. It's like, oh, they're giving me a year. Does that mean I'm going to be dead in a year? What happens when the year is up?
The INS has granted Louis a 1-year stay of deportation, but the fear that he will eventually be sent back to his native South Africa hangs over their lives.
Well, I would like to put all our resources into fighting the cancer. And every time we feel like we're getting something with the cancer, we get a letter either from the INS or we're just caught up in this wheels of justice, the wheels of bureaucracy. We want to just fight the cancer.
Louis admits that he overstayed his tourist visa in 1994, but he says he's been trying to straighten it out for 7 years. He married Marianne, a divorced mother of 2 children, in 1996. And the couple's attorney now wants the INS to allow Louis to stay in the U.S. permanently.
We know the government can reopen the proceeding, and we implore upon them to do it today.
Immigration officials declined to comment on camera for the story, but they do say they would be more than happy to sit down with Mr. Shaban to discuss all of his options. Hundreds of people, including Senator Charles Schumer, are trying to help Louis stay in the country.
To send him home now as his wife is dying and chemotherapy and everything else has failed would be so totally inhumane that I hope they'll take a second look at it.
Michael Aluni, CBS 2 Nightcast.
Cherry blossoms are a sure sign of spring.
93, overstayed his visa in 94. Shaban then agreed to a voluntary departure 2 years later. But instead of leaving the country, he married his longtime friend, Marianne, assuming everything would be fine. But on the day the couple filed their papers, they were turned away, tangled up in an unexpected maze of red tape.
We got his letter of deportation on the day of my first chemo treatment. And I looked at my husband and I said, they put the nail in my coffin. It's like, oh, they're giving me a year. Does that mean I'm going to be dead in a year?
The fact is that this gentleman came into the United States as a visitor, did nothing untoward, and overstayed his visa, and is in a maze of bureaucracy right now without a heart.
U.S. Senator Charles Schumer had even intervened with a letter, stating that if the INS were to force Mr. Shaban from the U.S. at this juncture, it will certainly result in irreparable harm to Marianne. As a result, the INS granted Shaban a delay of deportation until January of 2002.
We're just caught up in this wheels of justice, the wheels of bureaucracy. You want to just fight the cancer.
And if Shaban leaves the country now, he'll be banned from re-entering for at least 10 years. A spokesperson with the INS did say they're willing to sit down with Shaban or his attorney to discuss the alternatives. Reporting live from Midtown, I'm Lauren DeFranco, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
Lauren, tests are being conducted.
A Long Beach cancer patient whose husband is facing deportation is going public with her plea for mercy from immigration authorities. Marianne Lamont Shaban was diagnosed with lung cancer last year. She just might have to continue her treatment alone. Her husband overstayed a tourist visa in 1994. The INS wants him sent back to South Africa. Shabans have gathered letters from hundreds of people begging for a break.
I think it's probably more than I can deal with right now. It really is. I mean, just, you know that you have this horrible sickness and you could be dying, and it's more, I don't know, how do you deal with that he's going to be gone and I'm going to be completely alone?
The Immigration Service had previously granted Louis Shaban a one-year extension. He says his wife will face eviction if he cannot stay here and earn a paycheck.
Well, in other news tonight, the situation stinks, according to some Suffolk County residents.
To be in great shape, to get in great shape. You'll see incredible results in no time.
Soriano 4 for 4. Right now the score is 8-5 Yankees in the ninth of a final for you when that game is over. Meanwhile, the Mets and the Braves resume their series tonight at Shea. Good pitching matchup with Rick Reed and Greg Maddux. Highlights at 10.